It's often said that the best Batman villains represent an aspect of Batman's personality, and the versions of the villains we saw in Batman the Animated Series are, by and large, the definitive versions. Hell, they were so good that many of the updated origins divides for the show would find their way to the mainline comic books over the last 30 years. There are so many excellent villains with deep, tragic backstories. Fan favourites like Mr. Freeze, who mourns the loss of his wife and wants to inflict revenge on the people he blames for her apparent death. Or Clayface, a struggling addict who has his humanity brutally ripped away from him. But when it comes to the very creme de la creme of Batman villains, there's one that easily sits atop of my list, and that's Two-Face. In the comic books, Two-Face was a fairly simplistic villain, the former district attorney who had been disfigured after having a bottle of acid hurled into his face. Losing his good looks and the love of his fiancée, Dent renounced heroism and decided to play into his own disfigurement. With his trademark two-headed coin, one side pristine, the other side defaced, Dent's personality would be determined by a flip of the coin. Clean side, he'd be good. Scarred side, he'd be bad. It's an interesting idea, it's just that the execution was a bit simple. Since his creation, many comic book writers have tried their hand at making Two-Face a more significant villain, with varying degrees of success. However, I'd argue that no one did as well with Two-Face as Alan Burnett and Randy Rogel did on Batman the Animated Series. I've talked at length about how I think Two-Face Part 1 is the best episode of Batman the Animated Series, and how Batman the Animated Series is the definitive version of Batman. But I wanted to talk a little more about why Two-Face is my absolute favourite Batman villain. So if these villains represent a part of Batman, then it's pretty obvious that Two-Face represents Batman's duality. Let's just look at his black and white suit, split evenly down the middle to match his facial disfigurement. I'm amazed that no one had thought to put him in a black and white costume before this point, because it seems like such an obvious path to take. I also really like the blue colouring of his disfigurement. Traditionally in the comics he's either been green, purple or red, but perhaps these were deemed to be a bit too gruesome for a kids show. Instead, the blue resembles film negative from the days of analogue photography. For those that have never used film and a camera before, the photo's colours were inverted on the film until they were developed. This idea is nicely foreshadowed in Two-Face Part 1 when Rupert Thorne says,
"The brighter the picture, the darker the negative."
And Two-Face's negative side is pretty dark. But the thing I really like about his design conceptually is that he presents the psychological trauma that has shaped him for everyone to see. It's right there in front of us. Unlike Batman, whose trauma is buried within and he has to wear a costume to embody it, Two-Face's trauma is right there. No matter how he dresses, it's completely unavoidable. Without wanting to rehash my Two-Face Part 1 video too much, if you haven't watched it, go watch it now please. I'll just quickly cover some of the really cool moments that made me a big fan of the character. So when being blackmailed by Rupert Thorne, I really like how we see Harvey's face, drenched in sweat, holding back the anger while grinding his teeth. And then he just gives in, and a calm, sinister smile comes across his face. I will always remember this wonderful section.
"You're talking to the wrong Harvey."
This is a beautifully staged episode with some dynamic action and some of the series' most memorable scenes. Who can forget that final reveal of Two-Face? Harvey! Beautiful stuff. Two-Face Part 2 is a more traditional episode in that Batman features prominently, the villain's plot gets foiled, and the bad guys get sent to jail and Arkham Asylum. But it's still a strong episode. Of particular note is Richard Moll's performance as Two-Face. The final scene where Batman hurls a stack of coins at Two-Face, making him lose track of his own double-headed coin, fills Two-Face with anxiety. Richard Moll absolutely nailed it with his horrific performances. There's another unique point to the BTAS version of Harvey Dent, and that's his friendship with Bruce Wayne. As first seen in Pretty Poison, Bruce and Harvey are good friends, although they are keeping secrets from each other. As an aside, the fact that Harvey Dent made appearances in 2 episodes before he became Two-Face is also very neat. Their friendship is so strong that even Two-Face considers Bruce to be his friend. When Hugo Strange attempts to auction off Batman's secret identity, it's Two-Face that persuades the other villains that it couldn't possibly be true, while simultaneously claiming the throne of England.
"That's absurd. I know Bruce Wayne. If he's Batman, I'm the King of England."
Something I find really touching in BTAS is the fact that the Bat computer started out with a voice of its own, and it was voiced by Richard Moll.
Negative. Sound not originated by either species.
Now, I know that the practical reason for it is that he was present during the recording and he had the time to take the role, but I prefer an in-universe explanation that Bruce gave his computer the voice of his best friend. That's not official by any means, but it just makes sense to me. The talking back computer was a point of contention for some of the creative team, and it was eventually done away with, feeling it was silly or childish. But I like to tell myself that after Harvey's accident, Bruce removed the voice because it served as a constant reminder of what happened to his friend, and it was too painful for him. Now, despite these physical changes and the formation of a new personality, Harvey Dent and Two-Face have a lot in common. They're both on the same mission, to rid Gotham of organised crime. While Harvey wants to imprison the gangsters and remove them, especially Rupert Thorne, Two-Face is more pragmatic. He knows that nature abhors a vacuum, and that any gaps will be filled by other people. So, Two-Face decides to remove the key players and fill the vacuum himself. His whole scheme with Gil Mason in Shadow of the Bat was to remove the crime lords, clear out the opposition within the GCPD, namely Jim Gordon, and replace him with his puppet Gil Mason, who's a real slimeball. He's handsome and driven and presents himself as a man of the law. On the surface, he's very reminiscent of Harvey Dent, but in reality, he's Two-Face's stooge, more than willing to betray his friends if it means he can get ahead.
You're sick, Gil. A lot sicker than him. At least I can see his bad half.
Absolute scumbag. I'm also really fond of Second Chance, in which Harvey Dent attempts to get his face surgically repaired, only to be kidnapped from the operating table by Two-Face's henchman. Turns out Two-Face doesn't want to be erased and won't let Harvey kill him. Now, the thing I really like about this episode is the interactions between Batman and Two-Face. If you look closely, Batman never strikes Two-Face. Batman dodges Two-Face's punches and grabs a hold of him to try to restrain him, but he will not strike his friend. Two-Face doesn't feel the same way by any means, but that doesn't stop Batman from going out of his way to save him. When Batman swaps Two-Face's coin for a trick coin that can only land on its edge, Two-Face drops everything in an attempt to get an answer from his coin. One thing leads to another and Two-Face ends up following the coin off the edge of a building. Similarly, Batman stops everything he was doing, battling Two-Face's henchman, to try to save his friend. They're both absolutely obsessed with their own causes. Two-Face's to protect his coin and Batman's to protect his friend, to the point that they both endanger themselves without a second thought. This frankly manic incident aside, Two-Face brings out the absolute best in Batman. When Two-Face almost falls to his death, Batman is right there to offer a helping hand. When Two-Face rejects Batman's help, instead of allowing him to fall to his death, Batman leaps over the edge of the building to save his friend. Of all the Two-Face stories, my absolute favourite wasn't even seen in the show, but I 100% accept it as canon. Bruce Timm's black and white short story, Two of a Kind, originally printed in Batman Black and White, although it was later made into a motion comic which can be watched for free on YouTube. If you're not aware of it, go watch it and then come back to this video. I'll wait. In my own personal headcanon, this takes place in the Batman the Animated Series continuity, after Grace has left Harvey, and after his failed surgery and Second Chance, but before the new Batman adventures. In this story, Harvey Dent successfully repairs his face and banishes Two-Face from his mind. He falls in love with his doctor, Marilyn Crane, and the two get engaged. God, that Harvey Dent, he likes to move quick. However, he soon learns that his fiancée has a mentally unstable twin sister named Madeline, who is determined to seduce him just to spite her sister. Harvey gives in to temptation, but quickly realises his error and puts an end to the affair. In retaliation, Madeline murders Marilyn, leaving an ominous note written in Marilyn's blood. Now it's just the two of us. This message has a double meaning because, yes, in Madeline's mind, there's no reason for Harvey to end their relationship now. But to Harvey, good old reliable Harvey, the man who wouldn't hurt a fly, it's a call to arms for his old friend, Two-Face. This whole story is oozing noir vibes, and not just because it's in black and white. Harvey Dent's narration runs throughout the entire story, and I adore the sad ending with Two-Face murdering Madeline and cradling her in his arms, thinking about everything he and Harvey have lost before Batman turns up to console him. There's no struggling, no grand battle between Batman and his enemy, it's just two people. Two-Face mourning his lost lovers, and Batman mourning his lost friend. The sad thing is that Madeline fully accepted Harvey as Two-Face. She viewed him as being the real Harvey, without any of the pretense that we all put up, that mask of civility, the politeness. But Two-Face couldn't forgive her for what she'd done to Harvey. Not only did she kill the love of his life, but she brought Two-Face back. I'm fascinated with the psychology of BTAS's Two-Face. He's not two people inhabiting one body that can switch out at a moment's notice. Two-Face is Harvey Dent's response to trauma. He's short-tempered, he's strong, and he's bound by chance. Something about him speaks to me, and ultimately, that's why he's my favourite Batman villain.